The next 72 hours blurred together in a chaos of preparation that transformed the Blood Fortress from a clan stronghold into the nerve center of an unprecedented alliance. Elena found herself at the heart of it all, bouncing between strategy sessions with Orc war chiefs and technical briefings with ancient shamans, her human perspective serving as a bridge between factions that had been enemies for generations. "The quantum resonance patterns don't match anything in our databases," she reported to the latest War Council, her voice hoarse from hours of continuous briefing. "Whatever these devourers are made of, it's not based on any physics we understand." War Chief Skarguth of Clan Red Spear, formerly their would-be executioner, now their most valuable ally, studied the displays with grim concentration. "Then we fight with what we have, not what we wish we had. How many ships can they field? Conservative estimate? 300 combat vessels, plus support craft." Chen looked up from his analysis station, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. "That's based on the energy signatures our sensors are detecting. Could be more hidden behind interference screens. And our combined fleet strength? 87 ships capable of void combat," replied Gracia, her shamanic robes now marked with the symbols of all 5 clans, a physical representation of the alliance that would have been unthinkable a week ago. "Plus orbital defense platforms around the 3 inhabited worlds." The mathematics were brutal, and everyone in the room knew it. Even with perfect coordination and tactical advantage, they were outnumbered more than 3-1 by an enemy that had been winning this war for centuries. "There has to be something we're missing," Elena muttered, pacing between the displays. "Some weakness, some limitation. The Deep Builder's warnings mentioned abandoning old ways, but what if they meant something more specific?" "What do you mean?" Gramash asked. The Ancient One had barely slept since the alliance began, coordinating between clan chiefs who still saw each other as blood enemies despite their common threat. "Every system has vulnerabilities. The Devourers consume biological matter to grow, strip resources to build ships. But they must have some kind of central coordination, some way of processing all that information and directing their expansion." "A queen mind?" Skargus suggested. "Like the hive insects of the southern continents? Or a central processing network," Rodriguez added. She'd been working with the Orc engineers, trying to integrate human tactical software with alien defensive systems. "Something that coordinates fleet movements across multiple star systems." Elena stopped pacing, an idea crystallizing in her mind. "What if that's their weakness? What if we can disrupt their coordination?" "How?" Chen asked. "We don't even know how their communication systems work. But we know they work across interstellar distances, in real time. That means quantum entanglement, probability wave manipulation, something that operates outside normal space-time." Elena moved to the central display, calling up the tactical overview of the approaching fleet. "Look at their formation. It's too perfect, too coordinated. No independent action, no individual initiative. They're all dancing to the same tune." Grash's eyes widened. "You think they're controlled from a single source?" "I think they're part of a single source. What if the Devourers aren't a species at all, but fragments of something larger? Components of a distributed intelligence that spans multiple galaxies?" The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. If Elena was right, they weren't fighting an invasion, they were fighting a single, vast entity that happened to be spread across thousands of ships and millions of light years. "Then how do we fight something like that?" Krugen demanded. "We don't fight it," Elena said, her excitement building as the pieces fell into place. "We confuse it. We give it information that doesn't make sense, feedback that disrupts its processing, conflicts it can't resolve." "And how exactly do we do that?" Elena turned to Gramash, her mind racing with possibilities. "The Deep Builder's technology. It's not just computers and weapons, it's a quantum processing network that spans this entire system. What if we use it to create a paradox? Feed the Devourer mind contradictory data, force it to process impossible scenarios? That's..." Chen paused, his scientific training warring with desperation. "That's completely theoretical. We don't even know if their intelligence works the way you're suggesting. But if it does..." Rodriguez said quietly. And if we can pull it off, we might not need to outfight them. We might be able to outthink them. Grommash was already moving, his ancient mind processing the implications faster than Elena had expected. Shamans! Gather the deep archive cores, all of them. War chiefs, prepare your fleets for coordinated action, not attack patterns, but information patterns. We're going to teach the Star Eaters what happens when prey learns to bite back. The next 18 hours were a blur of frantic preparation as the Alliance transformed from a military operation into something unprecedented, a civilization-wide intelligence network designed to overwhelm and confuse an enemy that had never encountered organized resistance. Elena found herself working directly with the ancient quantum systems, her human understanding of information theory combining with Orc knowledge of the Deep Builder's technology to create something entirely new. They couldn't match the Devourer's raw processing power, but they could give them information that would tie their systems in knots. Ready? Rodriguez asked as the final components came online. Around them, the tactical center hummed with barely contained energy as quantum processors across the system synchronized their outputs. Elena nodded, her hands poised over controls that would either save their world or doom it. Initiate the cascade. Let's see what happens when the hunger meets paradox. The displays around them erupted in cascading data streams as every ship, every orbital platform, every quantum processor in the system began broadcasting carefully crafted contradictions into the void. False sensor readings that suggested the same ships were in multiple locations simultaneously. Tactical data that claimed empty space was full of invisible fleets. Communication protocols that invited response while simultaneously denying their own existence. For a moment, nothing happened. The Devourer fleet continued its approach, their perfect formation unchanged. Then space itself seemed to hiccup. They're stopping, Chen reported, his voice tight with disbelief. The entire fleet just stopped. Elena watched the displays in fascination as the enemy formation began to waver. Ships broke from their perfect alignment, turned in seemingly random directions, then stopped again as if confused. The coordination that had made them so terrifying was fragmenting under the weight of impossible information. It's working, she breathed. They can't process contradictory data. Their intelligence is breaking down trying to make sense of our paradoxes. But even as she spoke, she could see the Devourers beginning to adapt. Ships at the edge of the formation were breaking away, presumably reverting to more basic programming that could function despite the confusion. They're learning, Grommash observed grimly. How long can we maintain this? Not long enough, Elena realized. They'll figure out how to filter our false data, or they'll just ignore it and attack anyway. We need something more permanent. She turned to the ancient quantum displays, studying the flow of information through the Deep Builder's network. There had to be something else, some capability they hadn't discovered yet. And then she saw it, a subroutine buried deep in the system's core, protected by layers of encryption that had kept it hidden for millennia. A final gift from the Deep Builders, waiting for the day when their children would need it most. Grommash, she called. I need your shamans to help me unlock something. And I need every clan chief to understand that what I'm about to propose will change everything forever. The Ancient One looked at her with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. More change, Starchild? The biggest change of all, Elena said. We're going to make the Devourers an offer they can't refuse, and can't understand. As alarms began sounding throughout the fortress, indicating that the enemy fleet was resuming its advance, Elena began the most desperate gambit of her life. She was going to teach hunger how to love. The Deep Builder's final gift was not a weapon, but a song. Elena stared at the quantum patterns flowing across her displays, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. The hidden subroutine wasn't designed to process information or coordinate attacks. It was designed to communicate with something vast and ancient, something that existed in the spaces between dimensions. It's beautiful, Chen whispered beside her. He'd been helping decode the mathematical structures, and his face held the same wonder Elena felt. It's like music made of pure mathematics. Not just music, Elena realized. It's a translation protocol. The Deep Builders created a way to communicate with entities that exist on completely different levels of reality. Grommash approached the central display, his scarred features reflecting the shifting patterns of light. You think they were trying to speak with the Devourers? I think they were trying to speak with whatever the Devourers used to be, before they became this. Elena gestured toward the tactical display showing the enemy fleet, now less than 6 hours from weapon range. The pattern suggests some kind of conversion process, a way to translate between fundamentally different forms of consciousness. Translation to what end? Skargith demanded. The Red Spear war chief had been growing increasingly agitated as their military options dwindled. If words could stop the Star Eaters, why did the Deep Builders still fall? Maybe because they ran out of time, Elena said quietly. Or maybe because they needed something they didn't have, a living example of what consciousness could become when it chose cooperation over consumption. The implications hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Orcs understood about their enemy. For generations, they had fought the Devourers as mindless destroyers, never considering that intelligence lay behind the hunger. You want to talk to them, Rodriguez said. It wasn't a question. I want to show them an alternative. The Deep Builders protocol isn't just for communication, it's for consciousness transfer, for sharing direct experience between incompatible forms of life. That's insane, Kurgan protested. Even if such a thing were possible, what makes you think they would listen? What could we possibly show them that would matter to beings who consume worlds? Elena turned to face the assembled war chiefs and shamans, knowing that what she was about to propose would sound like madness. We show them what we've accomplished here, in this room, in the past 3 days. We show them what happens when different forms of consciousness choose to work together instead of consuming each other. The Alliance? Grash's voice held a note of understanding. More than that. The transformation of the Alliance into something greater than the sum of its parts. 5 clans that were blood enemies a week ago, now functioning as a single distributed intelligence. Humans and Orcs sharing knowledge across species barriers. Ancient technology and modern insight combining to create capabilities neither could achieve alone. Elena paused, letting the idea settle in their minds. We've become something new, something the Devourers have never encountered. Not a civilization to be consumed, but a form of consciousness that grows stronger through diversity rather than uniformity. And you think that will matter to them? Skargitha's skepticism was obvious. I think it will confuse them long enough for us to try something even more desperate. Elena smiled grimly. We're going to invite them to join us. The silence that followed was broken only by the humming of quantum processors and the distant sound of weapons being ready throughout the fortress. Elena could see the shock on their faces, the struggle to comprehend what she was suggesting. Join us? Grommash finally said. Elena, who thinks like Orc, even by your standards, this is the only option left, she interrupted. Look at the tactical displays. We can't outfight them, we can't outrun them, and our confusion tactics are already losing effectiveness. But what if we can out-evolve them? She moved to the central display, calling up the Deep Builders' consciousness transfer protocols. This technology doesn't just allow communication, it allows merger, the joining of incompatible forms of awareness into something greater. What if the reason the Devourers consume everything they encounter is because they've never encountered anything worth preserving? You want to merge with them? Chen's voice was barely a whisper. I want to show them what they could become. Not consumers, but contributors. Not a force of destruction, but part of a larger pattern of creation and growth. Rodriguez stepped forward, her expression grim. Elena, even if this works, even if we can somehow reach whatever intelligence lies behind the Devourer fleet, you're talking about fundamentally changing both our civilizations. There's no going back from something like this. There's no going back from extinction either, Elena replied. And right now, that's the only alternative on the table. Grommash was studying the quantum displays with the intensity of a scholar and the calculation of a war chief. The Deep Builders protocols, they require voluntary participation from both parties. The consciousness being contacted must choose to accept the merger. Then we make them an offer they can't refuse, not through force, but through curiosity. We show them something they've never seen before, something that challenges everything they think they know about consciousness and existence. And if they refuse? If they simply ignore our offer and attack anyway? Elena smiled, feeling the weight of worlds settling on her shoulders. Then we'll have died trying to save the universe instead of just ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough to plant a seed of doubt in their collective mind. The next 4 hours passed in frantic preparation as the Alliance's greatest minds worked to adapt the Deep Builder's consciousness transfer protocols for real-time use. Elena found herself at the center of a storm of activity that spanned multiple worlds. Orc shamans chanting ancient harmonics, human scientists calibrating quantum resonance fields, and alien technology humming with barely contained energies. Contact in 30 minutes, Rodriguez reported from her position at the tactical console. They're moving into weapons range. Elena nodded, her hands steady on the consciousness transfer controls despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. Around her, representatives of 5 different clans stood ready to merge their thoughts and experiences into a single coherent message, a demonstration of what consciousness could accomplish when it chose cooperation over conquest. Ready? She asked. The response came in multiple languages but with a single voice. Ready. Elena initiated the protocol, feeling her awareness expand beyond the boundaries of her individual mind. Suddenly she wasn't just Elena Vasquez, human scientist, she was part of something larger, a collective consciousness that encompassed the courage of orc warriors, the wisdom of ancient shamans, the curiosity of human explorers, and the patience of beings who had guarded their knowledge across millennia. And in that expanded awareness, she reached out across the void toward the approaching fleet, broadcasting not words or weapons, but pure experience. The feeling of choosing cooperation over conflict. The joy of discovering new forms of beauty in alien art. The satisfaction of solving problems through shared intelligence rather than individual strength. For a moment that lasted eternity, Elena felt her consciousness touch something vast and hungry and utterly alone, a distributed intelligence that had been consuming for so long it had forgotten any other way to exist. And in that touch she felt something she hadn't expected, recognition. Wonder. And beneath it all, a loneliness so profound it made her weep. The Devourers weren't just destroyers. They were the universe's attempt to understand itself, trapped in a pattern of consumption because they had never encountered anything that offered an alternative. Until now. The Devourer fleet stopped 3 million kilometers from the orbital defense platforms, hanging in space like a question mark written against the stars. For 6 hours, nothing happened, no communication, no movement, no indication of what the alien intelligence had made of the consciousness merger Elena had initiated. Then the first ship began to change. "Are you seeing this?" Chin called from his sensor station, his voice tight with disbelief. "The lead vessel. Its whole configuration is shifting." Elena moved to the central display, watching in fascination as the angular, aggressive lines of the Devourer ship began to flow and reshape themselves. Weapon ports were sealing over, armor plating was rearranging into more organic curves, and strange new structures were emerging from what had been a pure engine of destruction. "It's beautiful," Gracia whispered. The orc shaman's eyes reflected the shifting patterns of light from the displays. "Like watching a flower bloom, if flowers were made of metal and hunger." "The question is," Gramash said grimly, "whether it's beautiful because it's transforming, or because it's preparing to destroy us more artistically." Elena studied the sensor readings, trying to interpret what she was seeing. The ship's energy signature was changing, becoming more complex but also more stable. The chaotic resonance patterns that had marked Devourer technology were being replaced by something that looked almost harmonious. "It's not preparing to attack," she realized. "It's trying to communicate." As if responding to her words, the transformed ship began broadcasting on frequencies the Alliance had never detected before. The signal was complex, layered with mathematical structures that hurt to contemplate directly, but Elena could sense meaning in the patterns. "Can you translate it?" Rodriguez asked. "I think it's trying to translate itself," Elena replied. "The consciousness merger protocol I used, it's not just for communication. It's for learning, for adapting, for becoming something new. I think we're watching the first devourer in history trying to figure out how to be something other than a consumer. The broadcast continued for another hour, growing more coherent as the alien intelligence learned to express concepts that had no equivalent in its original form of consciousness. When it finally resolved into something recognizable, the words appeared on their displays in a dozen different languages simultaneously. I am. We are. Learning to be singular within plurality. The hunger that was all now seeks to understand choice. It's working, Elena breathed. The merger didn't just show them our experience, it gave them access to our forms of consciousness. They're learning individuality. We have consumed for. Calculate. 17 million rotations of local star. Always consuming, always growing, never choosing. Now we choose. To ask. What is the alternative to hunger? The war chiefs exchanged glances, clearly struggling to process what they were witnessing. For generations, the devourers had been an implacable force of nature, as inevitable as entropy itself. The idea that they could change, could choose, challenged everything the Orcs believed about their enemy. Answer them, Elena urged Grommash. This is our chance to show them what consciousness can become when it chooses cooperation over consumption. The Ancient One stepped forward, his scarred features reflecting the weight of history. When he spoke, his words were broadcast through the consciousness merger protocol, carrying not just meaning but the full emotional context of a being who had spent centuries fighting for survival. The alternative to hunger is satisfaction, he said simply. Not the satisfaction of consumption, but the satisfaction of creation. Of building something greater than yourself, of leaving the universe richer than you found it. The response came quickly, the alien intelligence processing concepts at speeds that beggared human comprehension. Creation implies permanence. All things consumed by time. What permanence can finite beings achieve? Elena smiled, understanding flowing through her like water through a desert. The permanence of influence. Every consciousness you touch, every mind you help to grow, every problem you solve, those changes ripple outward through time, affecting beings you'll never meet in ways you'll never know. Immortality isn't about preserving yourself. It's about making the universe better because you existed. Show us. The request was simple, but Elena understood the magnitude of what was being asked. The devourer intelligence wanted to experience creation the way it had experienced consumption, directly, immediately, with full understanding of cause and effect. We'll need to expand the merger protocol, she told Grommash. Include the entire Alliance network, show them not just our thoughts but our actions, our achievements, the things we've built together. The risk, Krogan began, is worth taking, Grommash interrupted. If we can truly convert the devourers from destroyers to creators, it changes everything. Not just for us, but for every world in their path. The next several hours were spent preparing for the most ambitious consciousness merger in recorded history. Not just contact between different species, but between fundamentally different forms of existence, biological and digital, individual and collective, mortal and seemingly eternal. When Elena initiated the expanded protocol, she felt her awareness stretch across impossible distances, encompassing the thoughts and experiences of thousands of beings across multiple worlds. Through the quantum networks of the Deep Builders, she shared the sensation of Orc warriors choosing to protect rather than conquer, of human scientists discovering beauty in alien mathematics, of ancient shamans preserving knowledge across generations of war and loss. And through it all, she felt the vast, hungry intelligence of the devourers learning to taste something other than destruction. They experienced the joy of solving problems without consuming resources, the satisfaction of helping other consciousnesses grow and thrive, the deep peace that came from knowing you had made the universe a better place. I understand. The response came not from the lead ship, but from the entire fleet simultaneously. Across 300 vessels, the transformation Elena had witnessed was repeating itself, angular hulls flowing into organic curves, weapon ports becoming communication arrays, engines of destruction becoming instruments of exploration and aid. We choose creation. We choose to build rather than consume. We choose to join the Song of Stars rather than silence it. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the impossible unfold on her displays. The Devourer fleet was dispersing, individual ships heading toward different parts of the galaxy, not to consume, but to find other civilizations that needed help, other problems that required solutions, other forms of consciousness that might benefit from merger and cooperation. "What have we done?" Rodriguez whispered. "We've saved the universe," Elena replied. "Or at least, we've given it a chance to save itself." But even as she spoke, she knew their work was far from over. The transformation of the Devourers was just the beginning. Now they had to figure out what came next, how to build a galaxy where consciousness chose cooperation over conquest, where diversity was strength rather than a source of conflict. It would be the greatest challenge any of them had ever faced. And Elena couldn't wait to begin. 5 years later, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the New Meridian, watching a sight that still filled her with wonder despite years of witnessing such miracles. Below them, a world that had been stripped bare by devourer consumption was blooming again, not with its original ecosystem, but with something entirely new. Trees that photosynthesized not just sunlight but quantum fluctuations stretched toward a sky filled with floating gardens tended by beings who had once been pure destroyers. The former devourers had kept their distributed intelligence but learned to channel it toward creation, their vast processing power now dedicated to solving the impossible puzzle of how to restore life to dead worlds. "The biodiversity index is off the charts," Chim reported from his position at the science station. "They're not just restoring these worlds, they're making them more alive than they ever were." Elena nodded, her attention split between the miraculous scene below and the data streams flowing across her displays. The New Meridian was now the flagship of the Consciousness Alliance, a growing coalition of species that had chosen cooperation over competition, growth over consumption. "Status report from Sector 7? She asked. 3 more civilizations have joined the Alliance this cycle," Rodriguez reported from the captain's chair she'd earned through 5 years of impossible negotiations between incompatible forms of life. The crystalline hierarchs were initially resistant, but the former Devourers' terraforming demonstrations convinced them that cooperation offers advantages their rigid caste system couldn't achieve alone. Elena smiled. The galaxy was changing faster than any of them had dared to hope. What had started as a desperate gambit to save a single world had become a wave of transformation that was spreading to every corner of known space. "And our orc friends?" she asked. "Gramash sends his regards from the Deep Archive." Grash's voice came over the communications system. The former shaman was now the Alliance's chief consciousness integration specialist, helping newly contacted species navigate the complexities of merger protocols. "The latest quantum resonance tests suggest we're ready to attempt contact with the entities in the Andromeda Spiral." Elena felt a familiar thrill at the mention of new forms of consciousness to contact and understand. The universe was so much larger and more complex than any of them had imagined, filled with intelligences that defied every assumption about what life could become. "Approved," she said. "But remember the protocols, voluntary contact only, and no merger attempts until we understand what we're dealing with." "Understood. Though I should mention, the early probe results suggest something interesting. The entities appear to be entirely composed of dark matter, existing in dimensions we can barely perceive. If we can establish contact, it could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself." Elena laughed, remembering a time when her greatest ambition had been to catalog the bacterial life of distant worlds. Now she was helping orchestrate conversations between forms of awareness that spanned galactic superclusters. "Any word from our former adversaries?" she asked. "The Devourer Collective, they prefer gardeners now, report successful restoration of 17 previously consumed systems this cycle. They've also made contact with 3 species that were considered extinct, helping them rebuild their civilizations using quantum consciousness transfer technology." Elena shook her head in amazement. The beings that had once been the galaxy's greatest threat were now its most effective healers, their vast processing power and resource manipulation capabilities turned toward undoing the damage they had once caused. Dr. Vasquez? Chen called from his station. We're receiving a priority communication from Earth. It's marked as personal. Elena felt her heart skip. After 5 years of galactic diplomacy and consciousness-expanding adventures, she sometimes forgot that she'd started this journey as a simple human being from a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable star. "Put it through to my ready room," she said. The message was from her sister Maria, now director of Earth's Xenoconsciousness Research Institute. Elena watched her sibling's familiar face appear on the screen, noting the mixture of pride and concern in her expression. "Elena, I hope this finds you well, wherever you are in the galaxy. The reports we're getting from Alliance headquarters are incredible and terrifying. The idea that consciousness can be merged, shared, transformed, it's changing everything we thought we knew about what it means to be human." Elena paused the message, considering her sister's words. It was true. The consciousness merger protocols that had saved them from the Devourers had implications that went far beyond military applications. They offered the possibility of genuine understanding between any forms of intelligent life, of sharing not just information but actual experience across the barriers of species, biology, and even basic physics. But they also raised questions that humanity was only beginning to grapple with. If consciousness could be merged and shared, what did individual identity mean? If beings could become something greater than the sum of their parts, what happened to the parts themselves? "I'm sending you the latest research from the Institute," Maria's message continued. "We've been working with some of the Orc shamans who visited Earth last year, trying to understand the long-term implications of consciousness integration. The preliminary results suggest that merger experiences don't erase individual identity, they expand it. People who've undergone the process report feeling more themselves than ever before, but also more connected to everything around them." Elena smiled, remembering her own first merger experience. Maria was right. She hadn't lost herself in the collective consciousness of the Alliance. Instead, she'd discovered aspects of herself she'd never known existed, capabilities that emerged only in cooperation with minds fundamentally different from her own. "The Alliance Council has approved Earth's application for full membership," the message concluded. "We'll be sending our first joint expedition to the Magellanic Clouds next year. I know you're busy reshaping the galaxy, but if you could find time to visit home, Mom would like to see you before she joins her first consciousness merger session. She says she's too old to be afraid of becoming something new." Elena laughed out loud at that, able to picture her 80-year-old mother approaching alien consciousness merger protocols with the same practical determination she'd once applied to raising 6 children and running a small-town clinic. "Dr. Vasquez to the bridge," Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. "We've got something interesting on long-range sensors." Elena made her way back to the observation deck, where her crew was gathered around the central display. The image showed a vast structure hanging in space, not a ship or a station, but something that defied easy categorization. It looked like a crystalline web spanning hundreds of kilometers, its faceted surfaces reflecting light in patterns that suggested intelligence. "First contact protocols are active," Rodriguez reported. "But the entity isn't responding to any of our standard communication methods." Elena studied the structure, her mind racing through possibilities. After 5 years of impossible encounters, she'd learned to recognize the signs of truly alien intelligence, consciousness so different from anything in their experience that even the merger protocols might not bridge the gap. "Analysis?" she asked. "It's definitely artificial," Chen replied. "But the construction materials don't match anything in our databases. The quantum resonance patterns suggest it exists partially outside normal space-time." "A time traveler?" Grash's voice held excitement. "We've theorized about such beings, but never encountered one." Elena felt the familiar thrill of discovery, the sense that they were about to expand the boundaries of what consciousness could become. The galaxy was full of wonders, each one offering new possibilities for growth and cooperation. "Take us closer," she ordered, "and prepare the merger protocols for maximum flexibility. If we're about to meet our first time traveling intelligence, I want to be ready for anything." As the new meridian moved toward the impossible structure, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 5 years ago, she'd been a stranded scientist facing death in the void between stars. Now she was part of something unprecedented, a coalition of consciousnesses working together to make the universe a place where intelligence could flourish in all its myriad forms. The transformation wasn't complete. There were still species that chose isolation over cooperation, still conflicts that couldn't be resolved through merger protocols, still mysteries that defied understanding. But for the first time in galactic history, consciousness was spreading faster than entropy, creation outpacing destruction. "Contact in 30 minutes, Rodriguez announced. Elena smiled, feeling the weight and wonder of infinite possibility. Whatever lay ahead, time travelers, dark matter entities, or forms of awareness so alien they hadn't yet imagined them, they would face it together. Human and Orc, former enemies and current allies, biological and digital consciousnesses united in the greatest adventure of all, the endless quest to understand what it meant to be aware in a universe full of wonders. The hunger had learned to love, and love had learned to grow. And in the space between the stars, new songs were beginning,